Okay, this is a serious balancing act right now because I have a pop socket on the back of my phone, which then won't sit in my little tripod. So it's like sitting on the end, and then I've got a new extra ring light, and then I've got like little things stacked up to like keep it level. So yeah. Apart from that, hey guys, how are we? Long time no see. I know, I'm sorry. It's just been a wicked long few months. Possible surgery, then no possible surgery, then possible surgery, then no possible surgery. It's all to do with my spine. If you want to know, go back a few videos and watch that. But yeah, I actually may be having surgery. Well, it's like 90% a thing, so keep your fingers crossed for me, because living in debilitating pain sucks. Sucks a fat one. But anyway, I am back for a video. Yay. Have you missed me? I've missed you guys. I actually have missed you guys. I've missed doing this. I haven't worn I wore makeup to work yesterday for the first time in months. That's also because it's freaking hot here in Perth. But today it's going to be a bit cooler. Yesterday it was a bit cooler. Today's a bit cooler, so I'm going to wear the makeup. But I have not worn it in months. Long story. But anyway. Yeah. I wore it for the first time in months yesterday. And my boss is like, "You look very beautiful today." And I'm like, "Thanks, but that's..." And I'm like, "Yeah. So I look shit every other day." And he's like, "God damn it, I can't do anything right." But I'm just a shit starer. But yeah. So I'm back for another video. And guess what? Next week is my birthday. So comment below, wish me happy birthday. If you want to. I'll be 32 next week. I know, 32 years young. Let that sink in. Anyway, yeah, next week's my birthday, and then I get to spend a big old day up at the hospital having scans. That's fun. But yeah, so yeah. But anyway, let's get stuck into today, because this content, I'm going to say this now, is what I'm about to talk about is actually not suitable for young ears. So if young ears like watching me, just mute me or play some music, I don't know. So they can just watch the whole facial technique, I don't care. But I'm putting a pre-warning, it's not suitable for children, okay? I've warned you. So if you let your children watch this and listen to this, and then they ask you a whole bunch of questions about it later, not my fault, okay? Okay. So the subject matter, if I actually write the title of this the way that I'm going to, is unfortunately about someone that was murdered. But the reason I'm talking about this is actually because we went to primary school together, and he was my first ever crush. As a young girl, I fell head over heels in love with him. And he used to live up the street from me as well. But tragically, years ago now, when we were young, we were 21. So shit, this is like 10, almost 11 years ago. Be about 10, I think. I think it's going on, I think it's 10. Yeah, he was unfortunately, tragically murdered in cold blood. Now I'm going to tell you the story, because I remember I was working at a different job back then, and my mum had rung, and she's like, "I have to tell you something," and I was like, "Oh, okay, what?" And she's like, "Alessio," that was his name. Yes, he was Italian. Alessio, he was murdered. And I was like, excuse me, what? Come again? And I literally then spent just the rest of the day reading everything that had happened, watching news, reading articles, going onto social media, which wasn't as big as what it is now, going onto social media, talking to people I went to primary school with, and like being like, what the actual, you know, like this doesn't happen, like this doesn't happen. So anyway, basically his name was Alessio Dorizio, and in my eyes he was perfect. Growing up, we unfortunately did go our separate ways in high school, as I did move over an hour away from Perth. We did eventually move back, but you know, you're teenagers and you all go to different high schools and you all lose touch, or then you get back together and you reconnect. Anyway, so basically he was living in an apartment complex with his dad because his parents had separated at this point. He was living in an apartment complex with his dad, and his dad had gone out for the night and he had gone to the pub and was just having a few drinks, talking to mates. Anyway, this one guy that frequented the pub, sometimes he was there, and you know, just general chit chat amongst pretty much, you know, everyone at your local pub does. And anyway, no one thought anything of it. Alessio, he left. He went home. He was intoxicated. No, he did not drive home. He was very intoxicated, and he had left his house keys in, I knocked in my hair, in the front door accidentally. Silly boy, but unfortunately there's nothing you can do about it now. Ow, there's a knot in my hair, guys. Oh, that never would have been able to brush out. So anyway, he passed out on the couch. Went to sleep. Turns out, this loser, he doesn't even deserve, like, to be acknowledged as a human, in my opinion. This loser decides that he was going to follow him home, and then saw that he had left his keys in the front door. He took the keys. He then left, went home, got a duffel bag, filled it with things. This loser then came back, snuck into the house, leant over him on top of the couch, and woke him, and then proceeded to stab him repeatedly. Now, regardless of anyone's abilities to fight back, he couldn't fight back. And then this is a sickening part. This loser of a human didn't think he was dying quick enough, so then proceeded to suffocate him with a pillow. And then proceeded to try and clean up the crime scene because, you know, that's what you do. Anyway, his poor father had come home and had forgotten his keys and saw that his son was asleep on the couch. This is before this arsehole came back behind you. Saw that his son was asleep on the couch and was like, can't wake him. No, actually, this was actually after. But he couldn't quite see everything. You know, it's dark. couldn't quite see, so it was like, oh, he'll sleep it off in the, he slept it off in the car. So he slept in his car. Anyway, the morning came and he couldn't like get in by banging and everything, and he's like banging on everything and he couldn't get in. And anyway, I think he broke in through a window to then find his son murdered on the couch, lifeless, knowing that there was honestly nothing he could do ever to bring his own son back. He was gone. This sicko showed no remorse at all. No. He got life behind bars, which, in my opinion, is nowhere near enough. They should have let Alessio's father have maybe 15 minutes with him. Just casually open the door while this loser is handcuffed and forget that, you know, you've let the father in, just turn a blind eye and just let him beat the shit out of this loser. If I was a cop or even a judge, I'd be like, yeah, you know what, you get 15 minutes with him. No weapons, just your fists. Go for it, mate. Eye for an eye. And if you happen to beat the guy to death, oh well. He killed someone in cold blood and had no remorse. Tried to plead the insanity card, but guess what? 2 psychiatrists found him completely sane and just said he was a psychopath. He knew what he'd done. He tried to justify it, saying that he had killed a druggie and, you know, he was better off and he'd done society a favour. Whether someone takes drugs, whether they're prohibited drugs, prescription drugs, any kind of drug, it never gives you a right to take someone else's life, especially someone that has done nothing to you and nothing to anybody else. But you know what's even worse? This is not the only death that I would have to deal with within 12 months. That was also a murder. Yeah. You heard me. You heard me correctly. So, we're going into the makeup now, okay? Okay. Just so you know, I'm getting there. I just had to do my hair, and I wanted to do it a little bit cute and a little bit fun. It's pretty cute, isn't it? Yeah, I like pink. I don't know, I love braids. I love them. Anyway, and because my hair's all different lengths, I love that it comes like a little bit loose. Anyway, let's get into this. All right. So, oh no, I'm gonna do my eyes first. What am I doing? Good. I'm so like, meh, because it's been so long since I've done my makeup, guys. Guys. Okay. While I continue to talk, where are you? Where are you? Hello. Oh, there you are, primer. I found it. Okay. All right. Okay, so, I was working. Well, I worked for Kmart back in the day, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, I worked for Kmart. This is before Kmart became really cool, by the way. And Kmart hacks for a thing. This is going way back. This is way back. Anyway. Okay, so I made a whole heap of friends working for Kmart. And one of my friends, her name was Natalie. And Natalie had her partner, and his name was Steven. And they were living like on the opposite side, about 5 houses down from their parents in Bassendean, from her parents I should say, in Bassendean. And they had a beautiful little girl named Izzy, or Isabel, and they were pregnant with their second child. Now, Stephen was working for a bakery, and one of the machines when he was working in his bakery slipped, and he tried to obviously catch it and stop himself from being hurt, but he broke his back. Yeah, the poor bastard broke his back. Yeah. Anyway, he recovered. He was fine. He was able to walk and everything, which is perfect. He was given all these prescription drugs to take home and everything. But being the tough nut he didn't like being drugged up, especially because, you know, having a young one around the house, he wanted to be present and all that kind of stuff. So he wasn't taking any of the medication. Now, as you can imagine, these were in the morphine kind of, you know, thing. And there was, I think it was directly across the road from them, there was this family that they knew. And the daughter was friends or was partially dating on and off this low-life piece of shit. I'm going to put it bluntly, he was a low-life piece of shit. Okay? He is still a low-life piece of shit, in my opinion. And he will always be a low-life piece of shit. But I digress. I'm not going to use that brush. That brush is annoying me. Anyway, not the point. Ow. This low-life piece of shit found out that Stephen had broken his back. He also found out that he had some pretty lovely drugs. Hang on, I need to get my muscle water. Buck it up, buck it up, buck it up. I leave shit everywhere in here. Because I'm not currently doing light makeup because of my back, but anyway. Not the point, girl. Continue with your story before people lose interest. So anyway, he had found out that Stephen had these drugs. Anyway, believe it or not, these lovely couple, it was their anniversary, and they were going out to dinner. So Nat had gone to drop Izzy off at her parents for the night, so they could have a nice romantic evening and go out. Anyway, Stephen was out the back playing his guitar, which he used to love to do. So he was out the back. These idiots had seen that Nat had walked down the road with the little one. And they're like, oh, prime opportunity. This dickhead and this other bloke break in, right? They break into the house. They break into the front of the house. And they think to themselves, let's look for these drugs. Now, they couldn't find them. Good on them for having a good hiding spot, mind you. They couldn't find them. Stephen had started to hear something, so he stops playing his guitar. He then realises that there's these two idiots inside his house. They had come out the back, and Stephen's like, what the fuck are you doing in my house? And they're like, we want the drugs, blah, blah, blah. He's like, get stuffed. He's like, get off my property. He had managed to get them down the side of the house and out the front. And he's like, get off my property before I call the cops. Don't even think about coming back. And the answer is no, I'm not giving you my prescription medication. One guy, he wasn't really like into the whole thing. He was just along for the ride. And he had kind of backed up. So now, mind you, Nat starts walking back and can kind of hear a confrontation going on. And she's like, what the hell's going on? Stephen's telling them to piss off. You're not welcome. All of the above. This loser has a knife on him, doesn't he? He pulls this knife. He then proceeds to stab Stephen. The other guy, he bolts. He's like, oh, hell no. He makes a run for it. Smart, but not smart. Not the point. Continue the story. Nat is witnessing everything, so she starts to run. She runs up and she pushes this guy. She is screaming and she's like, get off of him, stop it. This guy pushes her back and she falls and she hits her head. She didn't realise she cracked her head open. She's all a bit disorientated. Anyway, this guy proceeds to... Stephen had turned around to walk towards the house to get away from him. He stabs him in his back. He stabbed him in his chest and he stabbed him in his back. He stumbles to the front porch, and meanwhile Nat manages to find her bearings and get back up, stumbles towards the porch. She's yelling for Stephen. This other dickhead runs off. Now, people had come out the front because they'd heard a commotion. Neighbours have come out. Stephen dies in Nat's arms on the front porch. She watched him die and take his last breath. She's beside herself. Cops are called, ambulances are called. Anyway, it's 11 o'clock at night. My phone's ringing, but it's a private number. I was actually sick with a chest infection, so I'd gone to bed early that night. Actually, no, it might have been a bit earlier. It might have been 9 o'clock. Anyway, the phone, it just kept ringing and ringing and ringing. Like, they just kept ringing back. And anyway, finally, they left a voicemail. And it was it wasn't a private number. It was a number I didn't know. It was a detective from Midland Police Station asking me to call them back. And I'm like, what? I ring this number back and I'm like, hi. And she's like, obviously because she's been ringing my number, she's like, hi Stacey. I can't remember what her name was, this was years ago. This is Detective such and such from Midland Police Station. I'm like, okay. And she's like, we have Natalie here with us. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, there's just been a bit of an incident and her partner Stephen, he's been injured. And I was like, oh, okay, is he okay? And she goes, no, unfortunately Stephen has passed away. I'm like, what the actual fuck? And she's like, Nat has been asking for you. Would you be able to come to Midland Police Station? And I'm like, yes. Okay, yes. So she gives me directions of where to go once I get there. And she's like, and I'll come down and I'll get you. And I was like, okay. So I literally had pajamas on. I chuck a jumper on over my PJs. I grab a pair of shoes. I run out into the living area. I tell my partner at the time, I'm like, I gotta go to the police station. Nat's there. Stephen's been stabbed. He's dead. He's like, what the... I'm like, I gotta go. And he's like, okay, drive carefully. So I get in the car. While I'm in the car, I call my mum and my dad and I'm like, this is what's happened. I'm on my way to the police station. And they're like, okay, do you need us? I'm like, I'll let you know. I'm just letting you know so you know where I am. This is what's going on. Blah, 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 blah. And my parents are like, okay, no worries. Anyway, I haul ass to this police station. I just fucking haul ass. I get there, I press the buzzer, she comes down, she comes and gets me, she brings me up, she's like, now forensics haven't been in yet, so you can't touch her, but you can sit with her. And I'm like, okay, perfect, no worries. And I'm like, what happened? And she's just like, there was an incident and unfortunately he was stabbed and he passed away. She's like, Nat will also need you to go over her statement with her. Just, to make sure everything's fine. And I'm like, okay. I'm 21. I was still a baby. And when that shit happens to you, you still feel like a baby. And you think, I just want my mum and my dad. Anyway, that's fine. I literally walk in. And she looks up. And she smiles and she's like, hi Stace. And I'm like, thinking in my head, why are you not a blubbering mess? Like, why are you not losing your shit right now? And then it hit me, she was just completely in shock. And I'm like, babe, are you okay? And she's like, yeah, Stephen died. And I'm like, I didn't know what to do. I honestly felt like crying, but I'm like, she's holding her shit together, so you need to hold your shit together. Meanwhile, There's blood on her hands. There's blood on her clothes. She'd clearly been crying. Just, it was like, and there was nothing I could do. I couldn't touch her at this point. I could just sit with her. And I'm like, okay, you know, are you okay? Yeah, I hit my head, but I'll be okay. And I'm like, has anyone checked your head? And she's like, yeah, paramedics at the scene checked my head. They didn't think it needed stitches. So I just came here with the police. And I'm like, okay. Anyway, I'm like, are you sure? I'm like, do you need anything? And she's like, maybe a cup of water. And I'm like, yep, I got you. So I get up and I knock on the door because it was like locked from the outside. And I'm like, and they open the door and I'm like, she'd like a cup of water. And they're like, perfect, we're on it. So they're like, we'll get you one too. So they come back, they've got 2 like cups and they bring a jug in and they're like, here you go, girls. Anything, they're like, do you want anything to eat? Can we get you some cookies? And I'm like, yeah, she's pregnant. We maybe need to get her something for her blood sugar and everything. They're like, yep, perfect, no worries, we'll get you that. So that's fine. Anyway, they then come in and they had quickly typed out Nat's written statement. And they just said, look, we need you to go over it. Just make sure that everything is like good. That's, you know, everything that you wanted to say, etc., etc. So I went over it, I read it. Like, she's like, can you just read it for me? So I read it, and then I read it out loud to her, and she was like, yeah, that's everything that I wanted to say, and that's everything that happened. And I'm like, okay. So anyway, we said, yes, that's her written statement, that's what she wants to say, that's the version of the events. And I'm like, where's the guy that did this? And they're like, he's on the run. There's a manhunt for him. And I'm like, this guy's still out on the streets. Side note, it was everywhere, all over the news, because they ended up having to say, look, if you've seen this guy, he's wanted for murder. He was on the run for 5 days, guys. He stayed missing for 5 days. But guess what happened? He rocked up at a mate's place and was like, I need to hide out here. And his mate was like, yeah, sure, no worries, mate. Hide out in the roof. So he gets him up in his roof. And he's like, yeah, just hide up in there. I've got to go to work. I'll see you later. This guy goes outside, drives 2 minutes down the road, calls the police, says he's in my roof. You have permission to break the door down. He's a hero. He's a hero. He's like, no, fuck you. You're not my mate. Anyway. What makeup do I want to use, guys? I think I want to use my Morphe. Hang on. Leave it all Morphe. Please excuse my fat rolls, okay? Excuse my fat rolls. Anyway, okay, so back to what I was saying. They then break down this guy's door, have a bit of a standoff, but eventually get him out of the roof. Perfect. He's then arrested, sent straight to jail. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Anyway, back to what I was saying about Nat. Anyway, the forensics team eventually show up. So they take her clothes. They take her clothes. They scrape on her fingernails. They take a sample of like her saliva and stuff. Anyway, the girl, because there's 2 of them, the girl forensics chick, she looks at me and she's like, you're a Rocky, aren't you? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, I went to school with your sister. So my younger sister Jess, we're like just a year and a bit apart. And I'm like, oh, freakishly small world. Nice to see you. Kind of like, this is the most awkward thing ever. a little bit lighter. So anyway. Anyway, we're just making small talk and stuff. And then they gave Nat like this like forensics like jumpsuit thing to put on, which she actually laughed about. More power to her, to be honest. I would have been a mess. Anyway, they were gonna let her go home, and I kind of was like, look, I know that she said she's okay, but I really think that she needs to like go to the hospital for her head, and just get checked over. I said, because she's pregnant. I'm like, you know, anyway, it took a bit of convincing, but she turned around and she's like, okay, yeah, you can take me to the hospital to get checked. So the police officers said that they would do it, and they would take her up to Midland, get her checked, and then they would take her home. And I was like, are you sure? They're like, yeah, we will make sure she gets home, because otherwise I was just gonna go up there and go with her. But they said, no, it's fine, we will take her, we will make sure she's okay. So that was fine. The next morning, I did not sleep that night, mind you. Everything was just running through my head. Anyway, it had hit the news, and then all these people come out of the woodwork and are like, oh my god, what happened? And I'm like, it's not my place to say. But yeah, cool, ask about Nat. She's fine, by the way. I just found it really rude of some people. Anyway, yeah, so anyway, she ends up calling me, and it's like 8 o'clock in the morning, and she's like, hey, the street's still like cornered off, but can you come over? I'd taken the day off work, and work was like, yeah, cool, no worries. She's like, can you come over? You just tell them at the end of the street, and they'll let you in, because I've told them I've asked you to come over. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So anyways, I get to a street, and I'm like, I've been requested to see Natalie. And they're like, and I'm like, my name's Stacey, and they're like, oh yep, no worries, you're on the list, you can drive down, that's fine, you can drive down, you can park in she's at her mother's house. And I was like, okay, cool, no worries. So I did, I drove down, and it felt so awkward because like you couldn't actually get in and out of the street unless you lived there. And like I looked down, and everything's like cornered off at the house, and it was like really sad to look at. And anyway, so I went inside and saw her, and like Izzy's playing and all that, and like her parents were there, and we were just sitting having coffee and all that, and I was just asking her how she was, and she's like, I'm okay. And I'm like, babe, you can say you're not okay. Like, you can turn around and say, I don't know how to feel right now. And she's like, no, I'm okay, it's all right. And I'm like, okay, you're still in shock. And she was still in shock, and that's fine, you know, because until you've been in that kind of situation, you don't know how to act, you really don't. Anyway, hang on, I just need to make sure I don't get in and ruin my makeup. Anyway, so anyway, we just like hung out and chilled out and all that, and next couple of days just, you know, checking in on her, making sure she was okay, which she was. She said she was fine. I don't think it really hit her until the funeral. Because anyway, we found out the funeral was planned. Now, it was actually paid for by the government because of what had happened. And so Stephen was actually part Aboriginal, and the community had come together and they played the didgeridoos at his funeral, which was just so beautiful. Like, they are just like amazing, and it was a beautiful tribute to his life, you know, that was taken honestly way too soon. And my mum had come with me to the funeral, so I didn't have to like go alone. And in like, honestly, in that week and a bit, because I think it was 2 weeks later, because of course an autopsy had to be performed, so his body was like the coroner and stuff, so to take a little bit, it's like 2 weeks before the funeral, I think it was. Anyway, how it happened? Oh, in that 2 weeks, she had lost so much weight, like so much weight. Yeah. So anyway, the funeral was really beautiful. It was like, honestly, so beautiful. It was a great send off and tribute to his life. God, just honestly. And then it turns out she was pregnant with a baby boy, and she named him Stephen after his father, which I think is so lovely. Like a beautiful tribute to his like legacy. So yeah, she named him Stephen, and I remember him coming into this world, and he was the cutest, sweetest little boy. But yeah, turns out, I'm not sure what he was in for, but Stephen's biological father was actually in jail at the time that this had happened. And guess where they were going to send Dick Features that had murdered his son? The same prison. Word got out, didn't it? Now, I wouldn't have blamed Stephen's father at all if he'd gotten a hold of him in prison. No way. I don't think anyone would have, you know? But they ended up putting this idiot into isolation. So he was away from general population because like word had gotten out that the person that had killed, you know, Stephen was coming to the jail, and his father was well respected in the jail, and they were like, let's get this piece of shit. Let's get him, boys. Let's get him and rip him a new one. But then, of course, like it was found out, and they were like, we don't really want that for you. We don't want you to end up having more time. So they stuck the loser in like isolation, so no one could get to him. Which I think, like, I get it. They just, you know, they don't want, one, they don't want to have to deal with that, and two, you know, you don't want someone that's like lost their son to like, you know, ruin his life further, you know, and end up in jail for longer. So anyway, this looks a little dark, but I promise you it's not. It's the lighting. Anyway, I'm rambling. Why am I rambling? Where's my... Oh, that was my starting powder. What was I gonna say? Shit. Yeah, so they stuck this dickhead into isolation. Now, they ended up doing his like preliminary hearing via telelink, right? Because honest to God, I think if they had have like brought him to the court, honest to God, I think one of like Stephen's family would have like jumped the pews and killed him with their bare hands. So they did it via telelink, and this piece of shit showed no remorse whatsoever. He did not care. He was laughing, and let me just, I need to sit on dry. He didn't care. He showed no remorse. None at all. And the judge was like, alright, you're being a piece of shit. Like, cut it out. No, cut it out. So he ended up getting sentenced to life in prison, which sometimes I wish that Australia had the death penalty still and we didn't abolish it, because sometimes I feel like, you know, eye for an eye kind of thing. I look hilarious right now, but it's setting powder, guys. Okay? I'm not a... I watched White Chicks the other day. Again, I haven't seen it in so long. Okay, brows. Haven't done my brows in so long. Haven't done my brows in so long. Nope, I've never used Java. Yeah, in the space of 12 months,